My father passed away. Here's what I've learned that I want to share with you. Hey, you, how's it going? How are you? Welcome to this, your Monday edition of the show. Yeah, your Monday, your new day of your new week, your clean slate, your fresh start. A chance now for you and I to move forward together into whatever it is that happens next. You're doing awesome. Hang in there. You got this. You are a badass. And if you need something, if there's anything I can do for you to make your Monday better, hit me up. I'm here with you. I'm here for you. At ADSXE. It's where you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ADSXE. Put it in your phone now in case you need it later. So, okay, let's not dive right into it. I need to kind of ease my way back into podcasting and talking to you after my father passed. So first and foremost, thank you so much to everyone that has decided to support the podcast on Patreon. Since I started podcasting back in December at my father's hospital bedside while he was sleeping, people had been asking if they could support the podcast in some way, shape, or form. I started it mostly so I could keep the conversations you and I have been having for the last 17 years on the radio. Selfishly, because these conversations are what have gotten me through, but also because, well, these talks that you and I have, the way we've all grown up together over the last 17 years, they mean an awful lot to me. You mean an awful lot to me. And the conversations continue to get me through. Hopefully, they help do the same for you. But so many people had asked right off the bat, how can I support this? And I really hadn't thought it through that far. I knew I was leaving a job of 17 years. I knew I would eventually, and still have to eventually, figure out what comes next. But I just knew I wanted to keep these conversations going, so I started the podcast. So many people had asked to support. So many people had suggested creating a Patreon page, and I went ahead and did it last week. And, you know, I'm glad I did, because I really cannot describe the feeling of warmth and connection it gave me when people actually started to be a part of it. These conversations are, well, turning into conversations mostly around mental health. And I think those conversations should be free to all forever. So I knew if the podcast was going to become a regular thing, which it has become, that I didn't want to charge a subscription for it. I didn't want to put it behind a paywall. I wanted this to be a place where you, me, all of us could come together and talk things out. I've said it before, I will say it again. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am in no way, shape, or form qualified to give any kind of advice. But I do know that when you talk things out, when you hear things that are going on in your life from someone else's perspective, oftentimes hearing somebody else say these things out loud makes things clearer, more manageable, helps you figure out a path forward. And I wanted these conversations to be open to every last person and always will. So there is absolutely no need for you to support this on Patreon. But I will tell you that the people who did, I don't know why. I don't know why it is that it meant so much, but it made me feel so connected. So connected to you and so cared for during a time where that means an awful lot. I think that always means an awful lot. So to those of you that wanted to support, thank you. Thank you so much. To those of you that want to support by listening or by sharing, thank you so much. I want to make this clear. You are in no way, shape, or form to feel in any sense like this is something you should do. But if you, like a lot of people, have asked for a way you can support, patreon.com/ADSXE. That's patreon.com/ADSXE. Thank you so much to everyone that supported so far. In a way that I can't fully quite explain yet, it means way more to me than I thought that it would. You're the greatest. Thank you. All right. I guess I'm going to have to bite down and talk about this now. My father passed away. A few weeks ago. And my father's health had not been good. If you have been along for the ride on this podcast journey, you know that I started doing these when I was in Kosovo at his hospital bedside, for all the reasons you and I discussed. I went out to Kosovo after my dad wound up in hospital after a medical emergency. It was supposed to be a 3-day trip. He was going to be fit to fly. I was going to bring him back to America, and we were going to figure out what was next. Every step of the way got more difficult and more complicated. His medical situation devolved. We wound up spending about 6 weeks together. First in Kosovo, then in Macedonia. It was an adventure. It was a wild ride. Someday I'll detail a little bit more of it. A couple of people who know about such things, friends and family members that work in the mental health business, said, yeah, good idea to write all this stuff down. It's going to be a big part of the way that you come to terms with everything that's happened over the last month or so, or I guess now last few months. So maybe at one point I'll write it all down. Maybe at one point I'll tell the whole story of my dad's final wild ride that he took me along for. But right now I just can't. I can't talk about all of it. I can't. I had these notions that I was going to get on here and do a big tribute to my dad. And I don't think there's any way I could ever do that justice. And I think what it's going to have to be is, as I go through all the things that losing a parent involves, you'll probably hear me weave a lot of my thoughts and feelings about my father and his situation into this. My dad, and like I said, I can't do this. I just can't do this. I can't do a big sort of show dedicated to my father because I would never feel as though it had been enough. But my dad was a brilliant man. My dad was a guy who was the star pitcher of his high school baseball team. My dad was a guy who taught me how to pitch, never quite managed to impart the wisdom of throwing that incredible curveball he had. But I understood it. I understood exactly why he was the star pitcher of his high school baseball team when I would try and catch that curveball. This was a big part of my relationship with my dad, baseball, going all the way back to being allowed to stay up late while living in England to watch the 1986 World Series, a World Series that, well, turned me into the lifelong Mets fan that I am, even though my dad, right until the very end, was a huge supporter of the New York Yankees. We were a house divided in some ways, but baseball brought us together. Little kid allowed to stay up late to watch the World Series because we were living in a foreign country and I was from New York. And a New York team was in what turned out to be one of the greatest and most historically significant World Series of all time. And that, I think, was the beginning of baseball being a bond with my father. Plus, like I said, he was a star pitcher on his high school baseball team. There's an amazing story that people who went to high school with my dad will still tell you about him during a big game taking a line drive to the face. This ball hit him in the mouth. And he managed to pick the ball up and throw the runner out at first before heroically collapsing, making the final out of the game and giving the team the big win. He was kind of a hometown hero in that respect, in his hometown of Rochester, New York, where he moved with his family from Scarborough, Yorkshire, England, when he was just a little kid. He grew up the child of two unbelievably English parents in a town that is pretty much any town USA. Before he graduated high school, went to college, eventually law school at the University of Michigan, where he became a Juris Doctor in law, and then went on to Brussels because he'd graduated at the tippy top of his class and earned a fellowship to study Eastern European law in Brussels, in Belgium, where it became his field of specialty and where I was born. But baseball was a special bond to us. We would play catch. And there's something about playing catch. Whether it's a baseball and a couple of gloves, or whether you're just tossing something around a room with some friends, you might have noticed this, but conversation tends to flow. You're focusing on the ball, but you don't have to give that much focus. It's just enough to kind of free your mind from its everyday shackles and let it wander a little bit while another person is there. And because of that, playing catch can result in some really interesting conversations. And a lot of my dad's best conversations with me happened while we were playing catch. I was a pitcher. I was never as good as him, but I was a pitcher. Also, I caught. And I understand exactly why my father was his high school baseball team's star pitcher, because he had this unbelievable curve, this crazy curveball. And it's funny, as my dad was in hospital, he was in and out of being lucid and conscious of where he was, but he talked about the past a lot. We got into great conversations about the past, about his time going to law school at the University of Michigan in the late 60s. And it really helped me understand who he was and where he was coming from. And he talked about it before, but it was great to hear. He also talked about his time playing baseball in high school and talked fondly of that curveball. And I understand exactly why it made him the star of his school baseball team, because I pitched, but I was also a catcher for a little bit. And I would pitch to my father. He would call my mom out to look at it and go, "Look at the heat on this ball. Look what the boy can do." Maybe the proudest moments of my life when my father called my mother outside to see how the fastball was coming along. To hear that pop in the catcher's mitt that my dad was holding. To feel a sense of pride from that, and to feel even more pride when my father, proud of me, called my mom out to see what I could do. And then we'd switch gloves. He would take the baseball glove that my grandfather had given me. I would take the catcher's mitt, and he would pitch to me. The fastball came in frighteningly quick, but I could catch it. My dad had impeccable location. All I had to do was hold the catcher's mitt up, hope for the best, and it would hit its mark every last time. But when he threw that curveball in, it was almost like it came at me in slow motion. It was impossible to track because it was spinning so slowly. It was almost like it corkscrewed into the glove. And it almost always found the glove. Because again, my dad, even throwing a curve, his vicious curve had impeccable location, but I would look at it and I would have no idea how I was going to catch it. And I was like, if I can't imagine how I'm going to catch this thing, what must it have been like trying to hit it? I'll tell you what it was like trying to hit it. Impossible. So I understand exactly why my dad was the star pitcher on his high school baseball team. I don't know if he had a future in pitching, but he saw his future in law. And he did what he set out to do. He became a lawyer. He worked in corporate law. He had incredible stories of going to Russia and doing legal work with Russians during the height of the Cold War. And he said that one of the incredible intimidation tactics that Russians used during these negotiations was they made it very clear that in every last point of every contract, there was going to be a winner and a loser, and they were going to try and get the best of you. And they tried to intimidate him and his fellow lawyers by insisting on a shot of vodka after every point of agreement in a contract was reached. My dad would tell me this incredible story of being in the bathroom, getting ready to go into a meeting, an intimidating meeting, and seeing one of his fellow lawyers eating a couple of sticks of butter to coat his stomach so that the vodka wouldn't make its way into their system and they could remain on point throughout the negotiations. I was like, "Really, Dad? Did you eat butter?" He's like, "No, I had a pretty good tolerance, so I didn't do that." But he did what he set out to do. He worked in international corporate law, doing big important things to several businesses for years until finally, I think in the 90s, he had a bit of a crisis of conscience. And the fact that he was essentially a bit of a hippie who went and did his law degree in the Berkeley of the Midwest, the University of Michigan, he changed courses and he decided he wanted to help people. He wanted to use his skills in the world of Eastern European law to help others. And that was pretty much how my dad wound up in places like Kosovo. Wherever there was a human rights concern that his legal prowess could help. Wherever there were lives of less fortunate that could be lost, that needed to be defended through legal channels, my dad would do his very best to be there. And he went from being on the front lines of all of that to eventually nurturing young legal talent with his considerable global experience and helping them figure out how to get from A to B. And he made his life in Kosovo, where he found a great sense of purpose. So many people told me after my father passed away that the people of Kosovo owe him a great debt of gratitude for everything that he did for all of them. And as years go by, I might better understand exactly what that was, but I do know that it was what he wanted. He wanted to help other people. And even though that meant I saw much less of him than I wanted to, well, it was what he wanted to do. And I'm glad he was able to do that. I'll be working through my feelings about my dad and our lives and everything that this entails for a long time, I think. He was supposed to still be here. He had been given a discharge from hospital. He was going to go to another facility for rehab, and we were going to figure out what the next portion of his life was going to be. But that didn't happen. It didn't work out that way. I'm eternally grateful for the extra time I got with him over the last 6 weeks. I had several months. I don't know. But I got a lot of extra time with my father. Not all of it was easy. A lot of it was unbelievably difficult, but I got it. It was both terrible and invaluable, I think. And I'm especially grateful that I got him back to America and he was able to see my sister and his sister, his last remaining blood relatives, before he left. Some people that knew my father were nice enough to share some memories of him, which is especially helpful. And I'll share one now from a guy who is a friend of the family. guy called Ian, who we got to know while I was growing up in London. He said it became clear that Nick, whilst having the brightest and friendliest smile on the planet — Nick's my dad, by the way — it became clear that Nick, whilst having the brightest and friendliest smile on the planet, was also a very, very serious player in the legal world when it came to looking after and protecting people caught in the most serious of conflicts. I always thought your dad should be featured in a movie entitled The Quietest Hero. He just never made any fuss, but was always working. Definitely knew what the word mission really meant. We have not seen each other face to face for some years now, but Facebook offered us a very gentle conduit through which to communicate. I might have posted something from Amnesty International or some ridiculous old Monty Python sketch. Whichever end of the social post spectrum it was from, I would often get a like, a comment, a hello from Nick that kept our link intact. In an age when stupid men seem to rule us and angry men want to fight us and wealthy men want to own us, he was a real man. Passion, conviction, skill, humor, compassion, empathy, and iron-forged determination. Everything that any boy needs in his father were all a part of Nick. No need to miss him too much, AD. And no need to feel that he has gone anywhere. After my father passed away, I saw myself in the mirror and I realized he was right there. And thank you for that, Ian. Does a much better job of explaining who my father was than I think I ever could. And thank you so much to everyone who has been there with their love and support. Nothing takes the pain away. Nothing makes going through the grief easier or faster. It hits you in waves. And sometimes they get smaller and further apart. That's what I've been told. But nothing takes that away. Nothing makes that different. That's what I've learned. But I've also learned that the love and support that you feel from others does really, really make a difference. I think maybe my very favorite message of support that I got came from a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. If you've listened to me on the radio in Houston for any amount of time, you might know this guy because he's also on radio in Houston, a guy called Ramon Robles, who is not only one of my best friends on the face of the planet, but also the producer of a show called The Michael Berry Show. And he told me, "Hey, my friend, I wish I had smarter words to comfort you. I just want you to know, after reading about your dad, I called mine and just poured out all my love and admiration for him. I love you, buddy." And I think that if you have someone you love and admire, what would mean a lot to me is if you did exactly what Ramon did. If my experience with my father in the last several months and eventually losing him could do anything, I would hope that it would be making you or suggesting to you that you call up the people you love and you pour out all your love and admiration for them too. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time that you and I spend together, it really is the best part of my day every single day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Have a good one. Later.